5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Ground segment for satellites. That is obviously a really important part of the space ecosystem, but we have not yet discussed it on this podcast. That was overdue, so I'm super happy that Giovanni Pandolfi is a co-founder of Leafspace, which is one of the prominent startups in this field, is our guest this week. Enjoy.
My name is Raphael Rodkin, and I'm an investor and advisor to space companies. Just as a reminder, this podcast is for informational purposes only, and nothing should be taken as investment advice. This podcast is sponsored by Nano Avionics, a satellite manufacturer and mission integrator. Their technologies enable many space companies worldwide to offer services that improve life right here on Earth, such as providing global connectivity, conducting Earth observation, or contributing to scientific discoveries. Check them out, and also check out my episode with the CEO and co-founder. Sadly, I am not a rocket scientist, but I'm an alumnus of the International Space University. ISU offers a number of educational programs about space worldwide. Check them out at isunet.edu.
And just some final things before we start the episode about ourselves. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platforms such as Apple or Spotify. If you want us help expand our work, you can do so and support us at www.patreon.com/Space Business Podcast, and we'll also put that link in the episode notes. And lastly, you can follow us on Twitter at podcast_space.
Hey, welcome back, space enthusiasts. It's time for another episode of the Space Business Podcast. This is one of the episodes where we have a co-founder from a prominent European space startup, Leafspace, here. My guest this week is Giovanni Pandolfi, and he's the co-founder and chief strategy officer of Leafspace. Welcome, Giovanni.
Hi, Raphael. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And why don't we start off, as we always start off in these episodes, with founders? And do you mind giving us just the elevator pitch on Leafspace, please?
Sure. So Leafspace is a ground segment as a service provider. So we provide connectivity to satellite operators to simplify their way that they communicate with their asset in space. We started with satellites. We expanded also to launch vehicles. And right now we're supporting a bit more than 80 satellites in orbit. We are doing 12,000 passes per month. So we grew quite a bit in the last years. And right now we can support different customers with different applications in space, from Earth observation, optical, SAR, hyperspectral, to direct-to-device, to technology demonstrations, OTVs. So quite a few. We believe that we are, and this is also what we're trying to do, is really to simplify the user experience to actually communicate with one asset in space, just to avoid that constraint from the operations that you have once you are operating a spacecraft.
Okay, great. There's a lot to unpack, and we will go through various aspects of what you just said, but maybe take a step back. And so you and your co-founders, how did you guys come up with that? Did you have previous sort of history with this, or what was the motivation?
So it's a long story, actually, because we started Leaf in 2014. So we are, let's say, a kind of old company in the new space market. And we met with the other co-founders at university here in Milan, so at Politecnico di Milano, where we founded actually a student association doing experimental rocketry that is called Skyward, and they're still doing quite great in the European ecosystem of rocketry. And after a couple of years, we were thinking, we say, okay, let's do something more serious. So let's build our own company. And we were still at university there. The goal was totally different from what we're doing right now. So the first idea was to build another small launch vehicle, let's say, for SmallSat. It was 2014, nothing out there, totally different market. And after a couple of years that we did, a technical feasibility study, economics, business plan, etc., we found it was kind of hard to raise the amount of money that we needed to raise to build it in Italy, especially at that time. You need to think that was 2014, 2015, so a totally different startup ecosystem in Europe and Italy. And we in any case wanted to continue in the space system. So we looked around, and the other sweet spot that we find out was really ground segment, especially for SmallSat, because there were no commercial solution to support those kind of missions. You can see that because back in the days, Spire and Global, that was the first constellation, they needed to build their own network.
In-house.
To have a good solution that was cost efficient for them, and in any case, good to operate. Then, of course, there was KSAT with KSAT Lite, SSC with other solutions, and so on. But at that point, there was really nothing, and so we say, okay, let's see, let's start from there. And I believe we got it in the sense that maybe initially we were a little bit too much earlier in the market, but then from 2019. 2020, it really started to grow quite a bit for us. So that's the long story. But it all started at university.
That's a really interesting story for many aspects. This is a whole discussion by itself, but it's probably a good thing you guys didn't start another launch company, at least speaking with perfect hindsight. And that's also kind of building that in Italy is probably not easy because you have the established incumbents in Italy and in politics.
Yeah.
Whatever, that is really a separate episode, I guess we could have on that. But it sounds like you guys almost, when you kind of moved away from the launch vehicle, it sounds like you almost had this like engineering type systematic approach and like see, was it really like a broad search kind of saying like what else is going on in the space sector? And then you guys eventually decided on ground segment?
Yeah, basically, yes, because, we looked around at different stuff. So, of course, we started with launch vehicles. We then analyzed also all the in-space mobility. So the second idea was to have like a small so the launch vehicle was based on hybrid rocket propulsion. So the next idea was to have like a small hybrid rocket motor to do in-orbit transportation, so let's say.
Okay, and then you realized that there was another guy in Italy, Luca Rossettini, already doing it.
Yeah, well, we knew Luca for quite a lot of time before that. Actually, we were collaborating with him back in the days.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was not the same. Was not the same thing. I believe the market at that moment was not that ready. And the ground segment was really because looking at the market and all the needs that the market had and the kind of solution and offers that were around at the ground segment, the only thing that you could find for small satellites at that time was really to buy some ground station from ISIS or from GomSpace and so on. And that was, probably not a scalable solution. And we did quite a lot of iterations before arriving to the idea of ground segment as a service. So before first was, let's build some antennas and sell them. Then we found out, but that doesn't scale that much. And then, we started with ground segment. We had a lot of iterations to actually find out what was the best way to accomplish that. I believe, now we have found our product market fit. That's been really good in that sense. And now it's really to change the way that we are actually doing to provide connectivity to satellites. If you think about that, we are still quite back in the days like when on the ground we had these switchboards and the ladies actually switching cables around. It's not that far from what we have right now in space, and that's crazy for me.
Understood. And so you guys are coming out of university, and I just want to ask you one question of that, because there's other people out there who are right now sort of in the situation you guys were at. I teach a course, for example, at EPFL in Switzerland, and on space entrepreneurship, and it's always oversubscribed. There's over 60 people, so there's a lot of people at university with interest of starting companies. But it's also such a courageous thing to do, right? Because you don't have any career experience yet, and you're kind of straight become. What was the hardest retrospectively? Was it for example, raising money? Was it approaching customers? Was it developing the product, or what was the biggest challenge for you guys?
I would say a bit of all. Now, first thing on the courageous part, I believe that we started that early. So yes, it was, let's say, courageous, but it was also a little bit crazy. So we didn't have, we didn't have loans. We didn't have any big attachments or whatever. So we could actually make that step without too many issues. Maybe when you do it a little bit later, you have many things to think about.
3 kids, a mortgage. Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Exactly. It's a bit different, You can bet it once you're there. After it's you need to be more serious. So that was the first thing. Raising money. Fortunately, we have been really lucky because one of the co-founders actually knew this guy. That is Roberto Italia, that is also on the board of directors of Avio. And we had this meeting, And this guy said to us that we arrived there with launch vehicle stuff, with the in-space transportation stuff and so on. And the guy said, that's too much thing. Think about one, focus on that, and get back here once you've defined what you want to do and once you're focused on that. So we did that, and we came back after, I believe, few months, and then he really said, okay, I like it, this is the number of this guy, this is a VC fund for early stage startups, go with that. And that was our first fundraising of our seed round. It was 1 million euro in 2016, so it was pretty big for that time in Italy. And so that in some cases was good because the story, the market need, and everything was defined. Talking with customers, definitely hard initially. At least talking with the standard space operators back in the days was really hard, okay, because we didn't come with any heritage or with any experience. So we were totally out of the blue. And but with some small set startups that worked really well because we were betting on each other, okay? We were betting on them that the startup was actually working, and they were betting on us that the system was actually working. So that at the end worked out. But still, we still have some push to actually get new customers, especially established customers, because even if now we have heritage, we have operational heritage, is always space. So it takes a lot of time to take in new vendors, new providers in any case. So that's always a thing that we need to push.
So when was this first commercial push? Was it like around 2016 as well?
So our first operational customer, we had it in July 2017.
Okay.
And the second one, we had it in, I remember, Christmas 2017. I remember that because we received this call. It was from Israel on the 23rd of December to ask for a LEOP support that was scheduled for the 6th of January. So it was pretty tough. And we didn't plan to we were still really early in operation. So we were, as a common European, we were planning to have our own vacation for Christmas and the New Year. We scrapped that thing and we needed to put some new stuff on the ground station to actually support this mission. But yeah, that was the start. But really, I believe the inflection curve really happened in 2020 because we had a lot of contacts on paper, but we were waiting for them to launch. We also had the Vega failure that delayed Vega for a few months. Then we had COVID. And so it all delayed a lot of launches for our customers till like November 2020. And then we started to have, at least one launch every quarter, in some cases even multiple launches per quarter, and that grew up quite well.
Okay, and so coming back to the product, right? And so one question I have there is sort of like, as you guys said, there were some other existing options around, like people like KSAT. So, and you guys sort of decided, as part of this exercise you went through, that you told us about, okay, we should be doing ground segment, but it's not like you guys had had experience in ground segment. So
absolutely.
How did you approach it? Did you kind of study everybody else who was out there and then said, okay, for these and that reasons, this offering is just not perfect and we're going to do it better in this way? Or how was your process and thesis that you developed there?
It was a mix. So first, yes, we did some competition analysis, but at that time, really, the competition was just KSAT and SSC. And KSAT started to have KSAT Lite, so they're a small set solution. SSC tried to have what was called back in the days SSC Infinity, but they never push it too much. So we looked at those as solutions, okay? But what we really focused on was to look at the experience with Spire and Planet, how they actually build it, their networks. And because there was a fundamental separation, okay, on that. Like KSAT Lite at the start was, let's say, the standard ground segment where there is smaller antennas. So with a pricing that was better for small set. Okay. And that was it. What we were trying to do was not just that. So not just having smaller antennas by the price, but really to focus on the user experience. So having APIs, having real-time data transfer, having automated ways to move the payload data from the ground stations to the end user. Those were a lot of things that weren't there at that time. So even APIs, when we started, we needed to tell to our customer what an API is. And we needed to tell to our customer that they cannot book the passes through emails to us. So, it was a bit of of a push in the sense. I believe that we did that because we didn't know how it was done. So we just look at how to handle remote locations and how to automate the most of it. And that's why we choose to have some REST APIs. We didn't want to spend a lot of money on basebands. And that's why we choose to have SDRs on our ground stations, even though at that time there was not that much support, let's say, of that.
SDR, software defined radios, right?
Radio.
Just
Exactly.
because we're a non-technical podcast, I was like explaining stuff.
Yeah. It's a good way to say instead of putting a lot of physical hardware radios in a ground station, you just put one digitizer and then you do everything on software, and that actually ends up really good, because the first thing that we found out is that every customer use its own protocol. There is no standardization at all. The only thing that you can do to actually work with n number of customers is really to be as flexible as possible, and so the technology really helps on that. So I would say, yeah, we analyzed what were up there, but we had that part of unconsciousness, let's say, that really helped to have a system that was really trying to simplify the user experience on that way.
It's almost good, right? It's because you guys were coming in fresh, right? It also meant, so of course it was also like hard, but it means you weren't held back by any sort of like stupid legacy stuff, right? Because I mean, you're saying like booking over email, that may have been the traditional way, but it's inefficient and stupid, right?
Exactly, and then we get to the good part of the heritage stuff. So when you need to build reliable systems and everything, even initially we actually built out our own ground station, our own antenna, and it turned out not to be a clever way, financial wise, let's say. But it was really good because we really spilled a lot of blood on those systems to understand how they work, to improve them, and with that, at some point we decided, okay, let's buy some antennas from outside and really concentrate on the service operation, on the end user. And I believe that was a really good move on our side. But if we didn't have that experience of building our own ground station and really spend a lot of time to make it work, we didn't have that experience to actually help customers for troubleshooting or even to troubleshoot with our own system. So at the end, it always paid off. Initially, it was quite kind of hard, let's say.
And just to kind of take a step back there to understand your business model, so you're saying, so you used to have your own antennas, but now you don't own the antennas anymore? Is that what's happening?
No, we own the antennas. What we used to do is that we were building
I see what you're saying. Okay.
of the antennas.
Like literally built. Okay, yes.
Exactly. Now we still build it in the sense that we assemble them and the antenna is owned by us, but we don't build it anymore. So we just buy the antenna. We still produce some of the electronics of the rack because that's particular to us. But then we just take the antenna, our rack, and we deploy it to the site that we manage. But yeah, the infrastructure is completely owned by us. We have a couple of ground stations that it's not the proper, it's not our own ownership, but we have long-term agreement of full time availability, so we don't need to to conflict with other operators. And I believe we really believe that this is the only way to have high service level, to provide high service level to our customers, because we can completely own the infrastructure. We can improve it as we want. We can decide how to move capacity from one point to the other to satisfy better customers. So it's much easier.
Yeah, you kind of answered my next question there, because the reason I asked the original question is because as you know very well, there is some like different business models out there where it's basically like virtual ground station networks, or sometimes we call like Airbnb approach to ground stations. But that obviously that's yet another different discussion and comes with its own and disadvantages and advantages, I guess. So I just want to talk a little bit about sort of like the current user experience you're offering. So kind of can you talk a little bit about your what exactly you can offer as a product to the customer, and sort of like your geographic coverage you can offer now. Oh, and by the way, I guess not to get too technical, but I guess in terms of like frequency bands, like what kind of connectivity you can offer, and yeah.
Sure. So let's start from that. We support mainly S-band and X-band. So 2 gigahertz for TT&C and spacecraft operation, and X-band for payload downlink. We still have some small UHF capacity. That is what we started, but we are deprecating it. Basically, there is not that much demand anymore for that, and it's a pain in the ass to operate with UHF. It's really hard to have a reliable system, and we are expanding to KA. So we will have our first 3-band system, so SX and KA, by Q1 next year in Iceland. So we are expanding really on all the frequencies that are currently used by commercial customers in orbit. In terms of coverage, we do support any kind of inclination in LEO. So SSO, polar, mid-inclination, equatorial, we have geographical coverage for that, but we're expanding in any case to different regions of interest. So right now we are really well covered in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Sri Lanka, and so on. But we are expanding right now to other sites in South Korea, Mauritius, South Africa, South America, and Mexico. So we are really expanding quite a lot our landscape. And this always to provide more and more capacity to our customers because we have, as I said before, we support different customers with different applications, and Earth observation customer need something, telecommunication customers need something else, OTVs need something else even more. So we need really to be flexible. But in terms, what we really provide, I believe it's a real differentiation with the rest is that, and that's why also we call it ground segment as a service, is that we don't just provide antenna time. Okay, we provide really a connectivity service based with ground station, of course, but we provide a connectivity service to our customers. So we cover everything from the antenna, the baseband processing, so how we turn electromagnetic waves to bits, and then from how the bits are delivered to the customers in real time or quasi real time. So the customer really doesn't need to worry about anything else. They don't need to worry about their SDR cloud deployment to transmit data. They don't need to worry about how to schedule passes around the network. We do that. And we do that also in an automated way, so we can really be efficient on how we use the network, what's the duty cycle of each antenna. That's at the end, it reflects on a really cost-effective solution.
Okay, that's great. So in terms of your customer set, right? Is it sort of like any of the standard applications you'd say you can support, whether that's Earth observation or different types of satellite communications business models like broadband, IoT, or let's say somebody wanted to do one of these alternative GNSS models? Can you really support everything, or is there something where it's like a sweet spot, you'd say, among the customers?
So let's say that in general, we can support everything. There's different solutions for supporting everything, let's say. So the standard applications like Earth observation, being it in different payloads like SAR, optical, hyperspectral, no problem. OTVs, so OTVs are all the technology demonstration missions and so on, so where the main thing is really providing operation supports, so TTNC and some payload downlink, no problem to support. Direct to device and broadband, we also support that. The real thing is really when you need to scale up, so when you need hundreds of gateways to support your broadband constellation. So that could be done by us because we have what we call LeafKey, that is a dedicated network solution. So we can build out the dedicated network specifically for a specific mission. It really depends on the scale. On that case, typically when you do broadband, you really need extensive constellation. So we can support even just part of that, maybe just for the TTNC, but then for the gateways, in some cases, it's difficult to have a scaling business on that side because it's a specific project done for a specific customer. So we're not anymore, talking about a product. We're really talking about a project for a specific customer. Okay, so you cannot, for example, rely anymore on a multi-mission network as we have Leafline. You need to really rely on a dedicated network. So yes, it can be done. We did it for a dedicated net for a specific customer with a small number of antennas. It can be more in case, but it really depends on the customer, what they need and how they want to approach that. If you take the example of Starlink and OneWeb, they had let's say kind of different approach, but at the end of the day, their ground segment was really integrated with their own architecture because we need that because it's a different kind of business. So I would say everything that is not broadband, yes, we can support.
Understood. And that's, I guess, the reason what you're describing that in the end, Starlink and people like that and Kuiper, they're basically building their own like, in-house.
Yeah, and,
ground
also
segments.
for us, financial wise, if we think like maybe we could have deployed the OneWeb ground segment,
At some
it
point, that would
was
have been very scary. Yes,
yeah,
if you have
it's
like if you're
like
that reliant on like such a big customer. Yeah.
yeah, it's a half a billion of contract for one customer with possible bankruptcy with whatever. So it's it's tough.
Yeah, it's a blessing that seeming blessing can start as a blessing and then turn into a curse.
Exactly, exactly.
For sure. And so in terms of another thing I'm curious about sort of in the industry context is, so we've had AWS sort of make quite a bit noise around their ground segment activities. Can you put that a little bit into perspective for us and kind of like what you're seeing, how they're really acting in the ground segment, and how they may be either competitors or I suppose also partners for guys like you?
So I need to select what I need to say, but yeah. So let's start from the beginning. So it was November 2019 when AWS went out with the ground station as a service model, and we were saying, okay, we are fucked because it's AWS getting in this market with no problem to actually invest in infrastructure and no problem even to wait for the market to arrive. Okay. And also they make this nice presentation with a lot of customers. There was good players and that were say, okay, this is definitely a changer on that. I believe and we have a lot of discussion with AWS about that, but I believe, the main thing to do that was probably starting from a wrong assumption. So that in order to get to the interesting part for them of the cloud usage by space companies, especially for all the data analytics and so on, they needed to have their own ground stations to actually enable those customers to bring this data directly to the data center. And I believe this assumption was adopted by Digital Globe at that time, because it was so all the ground station thing really was born because Digital Globe at some point decided to move all their petabytes of archive from their data centers to AWS, using also the Snowmobile, that is the big truck with a lot of hard disk to move that. And I believe that from that conversation, it all started the ground station thing at AWS. But the problem is that not all the customers are like Digital Globe. And then that idea evolved with a thing of providing a bare metal service where you have the ground station around and you as user, you can use it, but you need to deploy your own SDR or your own thing to actually make sure that you make the communication. And so it's let's say another AWS service, but you need to have people to manage that. Okay, if you internally in your satellite operator team. And I believe that was good for us, let's say, because not all the customers have that capability and not all the customers have that will to actually invest in having a ground segment team to use that kind of thing. And I believe also it was a bit probably too early with the market in that sense. And, we took advantage of that. We had a quite good number of customers that went to AWS because of the name and then went to us because of the operations. So that was good. But one really good thing that they made is that they started to break apart, let's say, the model itself, and to break apart the duopoly of KSAT and SSC, at least on talking about ground segment. Okay, they were the new big player. What they did it wrong, or what it did it bad for the market, is that a lot of people just trust that name because it's a big company, it's the AWS, but then they find out after that it's not probably that good. So yeah, as I said, initially we really think that we were going out to close the company and so on because AWS entered. At the end of the day, it was a good competition, I believe, and we found out a good way also. With some missions, we're also collaborating as we're doing with others. So at the end of the day, it's always good for the market. It's true that there are a good number of operators in ground segment. The actual truth is that the real demand for connectivity and for capacity is not there yet. So KSAT is expanding their network like crazy. We are expanding like crazy, and the demand is quite a lot.
When you're saying you're expanding, is that both geographically as well as adding more capacity in existing locations?
Yeah, correct. Exactly. What we're doing right now, and especially in these let's say first year after our Series B is really to increase the coverage. So having new locations to provide more capacity per orbit, let's say, but also to doubling up most of the locations that we already have. Is both to provide higher redundancy, but also to solve an issue that we have with transporter launches, that there is a lot of satellites on the same launch vehicle, and once they are deployed, you see a lot of satellites on the same spot. And the problem with the standard parabolic dish is that you can typically speak with one satellite per time. So if you have a swarm of satellites on the same spot, one ground station can just communicate with one per time, and that's create a lot of issues. If you have two ground stations on the same location, at least you can communicate with two satellites at the same time. So it's a way to solve a little bit the issues of these crowded launches.
Okay. So like you mentioned, you guys, I think you said you have like 80 satellites now, sort of 12,000 passes. You just mentioned you're kind of past your Series B. You've clearly found a product market fit. If you kind of like, you've determined that Amazon is like not going to shut down the company, so like, that scare is gone for the moment. Like if you look out like, 5 to 10 years, sort of like, where do you see the growth path and then the ultimate vision where, you want Leafspace to be in like, let's say 10 years time?
Our vision is really clear, is that we want to provide effective and efficient connectivity service for space assets, so that we can really enable the development of the space ecosystem. Why we say that? Because we really believe that a lot of applications are really constrained by the way that we communicate with the space assets, because you have constraints in terms of access per day, constraints in terms of latency, whatever. And if we solve that part, make a really simple system to use, really flexible to scale, cost efficient, and etc., I believe we can really bring down those constraints and really enable new applications. So there are a couple of things. If everything goes well, we will increase our capacity, have more customers, continue on our continuous improvement of the service. And if everything goes really, really well, as we would like, is that with our service, we are really enabling a new phase of the space ecosystem, once where those constraints are brought down, and then new application can actually be done in space. We always do this comparison with internet. Okay, internet was designed for certain applications, military applications, but if you look right now, all the applications that we're doing on internet, it's crazy. Okay, and definitely I believe the application that was for which internet was designed for is really a small percentage of what actually we're doing on internet right now. So we believe really that in space we're going to see the same effect. There is a lot of technological issues that we need to solve, but if we solve it, the capabilities that we can do in space definitely are quite advanced. So that's why ground segment is always the last thing that someone think about, but is as important as launch vehicles, if not more, because really what brings the value of the data down is what enables actually the economy of space right now, since we don't have yet economy in situ in space.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. And we're going to produce so much more data, right? Because you have if you just speak about Earth observation, you have the satellites which are up there already, but there's like a number of, as well-financed startups going to put more constellations. Now we're going to have stuff like hyperspectral, which is going to produce really a lot of data. And so like we like I said, I think it's really important to make sure there's no constraints, because if you have a bottleneck on the downlinking, that's just not going to be good. But that kind of leads me to my next question. So I asked you for the vision for Leafspace, but let's kind of look broader, right? Sort of like, where do you see like the whole let's call it the ground segment sector, or whatever you call it, like what's the broader view of the future there? And some examples that I'm thinking of I could mention here is like is there going to be a role for like optical downlinking? Despite all of the technical challenges, how about these like people want to set up like relay networks and sort of like try to consolidate some data traffic in orbit and kind of like send it down in a more concentrated way? Is there any sort of exciting new you mentioned before sort of like how one ground station historically connects to one satellite, but is there anything exciting on the technology front, like new types of like antennas, that type of thing, like your broader vision for where things are going?
There are a lot of things that are really exciting, and hopefully we'll see fast as new application. new uses. So talking about optical, I really believe that at the end of the day, we will get to that. There are some issues still because of the physics of the optical link, at least to do direct to earth. For intersatellite link, no problem. It's the perfect thing to do. I believe even after Starlink actually start to using quite heavily, we will have a reduction of cost and more utilization of that in space. To do that with Earth, definitely possible. It cannot be the only solution because of the physics. So whenever you have cloud, rain, whatever, that link doesn't close. So you always need to have an hybrid solution, RF and optical. The good thing for us is that the way that we operate right now, that we have a scheduling algorithm that decide how to move the capacity of the network to satisfy the customer constraints and requirements, is a good way because we can, dynamically change. If we have a link in optical that doesn't work and doesn't close, we can move it to RF and vice versa and upgrade that. So that's a lot of movement, but I believe at the end we will be there. We just need to see how it works with Starlink and the SDA that are putting a lot of money on that. But I believe a good time frame will be 2025, 2026 to start actually seeing commercial things. Now we're seeing the same with the KA. The KA was a few years say, we have a lot of KA missions coming up and etc. Right now we're installing a KA because we have a customer with operational satellites in orbit right now with KA. So that we are market driven, so we need to have market to arrive there. About new kind of antennas, there is a lot of work on phased arrays or electronically steerable antennas. So, and the good thing of that is that you can have multi-beam. So instead of have, as you were saying before, instead of have one dish, one satellite per time, we have one thing, one antenna, and they can connect at the same time with multiple satellites. They still cost quite a lot. As I think there's not yet a commercial solution for ground segment, even though there are a couple of companies that are working on that. But there are, I believe, good hope to have an operational system with cost that makes sense to have efficient operations, and that will also simplify quite a lot at the operations also on our hand. And on satellite networks, that's absolutely needed because we can expand as much as we want our network on the ground, but if we don't find a way to have fiber connection in the middle of the ocean on a ship, maybe with Starlink will be a thing at some point. But we need to have some satellite networks to actually relay that information, and also to have like a low bit rate, always on connection. There are already some solutions. They're kind of expensive still, but there are good startups that are working really well on that direction, like Kepler or like others. So there is really a good momentum on that side.
Mm-hmm. When I asked you about optical, I should have expanded my question also. So you, as you mentioned, started with SNX and some UHF and now moving into KA, but now KA seems to be like everywhere. And sometimes it seems, maybe I'm being over pessimistic, but sometimes it seems like we're kind of going to run out of spectrum. There's so much going on. Do you think there's going to be, are we going to start moving into even other bands, like some of the higher energy bands?
So I believe that for certain applications, we didn't even yet come to the complete use of X-band. So there are quite few Earth observation operators that are really cutting each hertz of that band to put more bits on that, but there are not so many. So there are a lot of other missions that can still build up quite a lot on X-band. And I believe that the interesting lately on KA really came by the fact of, let's say, interference and the coordination need between operators of these kind of operators on X-band. Because when you pass, for example, in really crowded regions like, North Pole or close to North Pole, you have a lot of ground tracks overlapping. So the satellites are passing over the same spot at the same time. And if you have two different Earth observation operators transmitting on the entire band of X-band, you're causing interference with one to the other. Okay, so your actual usage is really reduced because you need to coordinate with the other operator to use that. And I believe from all these transporter launches with crowded capacity and going always on the same kind of orbit, it really pushed more to move to KA. So not just really for the data rate itself, but really also to have more spectrum to work with. So I would say yes, at the end, yes. In some cases, optical is more mature than like working with V-band or Q-band and so on. So there is more availability of a supply chain let's say. But there are few missions that are already starting to use that for their gateways, for example. So there will be more utilization of that.
Interesting. Okay, as we're sort of coming towards the close of the episode here, some final questions. One, if potential customers are listening, what's the best way to connect? Can they just go to your Leafspace website and kind of go from there, enter into the customer process?
Yeah, we have a really simple form on the website, and then we contact you directly. We will have more news in the coming months on how we handle this process of, let's say, onboarding, documentation sharing, pricing, and so on. So we're going to have some big news on that. So for that, stay tuned. But right now, there is a simple form on the website, or you can reach to us through LinkedIn or X right now. I still call it Twitter, but it's X.
Good stuff. We'll put a link on into the episode notes. And so the two final questions we pretty much always ask in every episode. The first is, so if you weren't doing Leafspace, kind of what else do you think is exciting to do in space business? And it's kind of a particularly interesting question to ask you, right? Because you guys have literally a few years ago now gone through this exercise of looking what's interesting. If you did the same exercise today, what do you think might come out?
That's a good question, actually. So I don't have a clear one, but I believe one of the most, let's say, interesting application that we have through our customers, and because it's a little bit different than the starter ones, it's really the direct to device. Because that's it's one of the application that doesn't have a problem of defining the market. So the market is definitely there. There is a lot of demand. Maybe in Europe we don't see that much because we don't have remote places in Europe, let's say. But if you go to United States, South America, Africa, East, Australia, whatever else that is not Europe, let's say, there is really a lot of issues with connectivity in remote places. And if you can solve that without any cumbersome device on the ground, that's really good. There's a lot of technical hurdles to solve that. But I believe it's really exciting and really where, you don't need to spend time with investors to actually explain what the market demand is. And there is a lot of numbers out there. So I believe that's really interesting.
Great. And then the final question we always ask, and you may have seen this already in other episodes, is about science fiction and basically whether you like sci-fi, and hopefully you do. And if you do, sort of what are some of your favorite works, whether that's books or TV series or movies or others? So
favorite ones, and I have there, it's the Free Body Problem trilogy from 16U. That's crazy as I know if you read it, or any one of the listeners read it, it's crazy. So you need to pass by the English translation that is not that easy on the first book. The second and the third, I believe, it got better on the English translation. But it's interesting, one, really for that, really how let's say Chinese expressions can be translated in English, because you see that there is a lot of difficulty on doing that. But the story is crazy good. And another couple of books that I just read in the last few months are from Daniel Sanchez. I was checking the one is Delta V, and the second one is Critical Mass. That is a biology, let's say, and it's all started about in situ resources utilization. So from asteroid mining to moon mining, and it's really hard sci-fi. So there is a lot of technical content, really well done. The story really good. So those are the two things that at least I read recently, and I really enjoyed that.
I can endorse all of your recommendations there. Giovanni, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you on. All the best to you and to Leafspace.
Thanks a lot, Raphael.
Well, that's it for another nominal episode of the Space Business Podcast. If you like this podcast, please consider giving it a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform, such as iTunes. You can follow us on Twitter at podcast_space. Also consider supporting us at www.patreon.com/spacebusinesspodcast. If the podcast got you interested in learning more about the business opportunities in the space economy, check out my new online course on space entrepreneurship on udemy.com. The link is in the episode description. Lastly, if you have any feedback, including ideas for guests, and that may include yourself if you have an exciting space story to tell, or interested in being a sponsor, drop us an email at spacebusinesspodcast@gmail.com. I look forward to seeing you for the next episode.